Known as the philosopher's historian, Diogenes Laertius preserved much of the wisdom and ideas of ancient Western civilization. Combining historical facts with comical anecdotes, avoiding speculation or projecting his own opinions and theories, without his book, truly little would have survived the Dark Ages. Diogenes Laertius' first book, The Seven Sages, Chilon, Pittacus, Bias, and Cleobulus. Chilon was a Spartan of the early oligarchy, early after Lycurgus' famous reforms. Diogenes begins by saying that he wrote a poem of 200 lines. Then he either quotes or paraphrases some of his lines. This man was made ephor in the 55th or 6th Olympiad. I rather liked.
The tale is also told that he inquired of Aesop what Zeus was doing and received the answer. He is humbling the proud and exalting the humble.
In fact, it should be an aphorism. The historian mentions many such things. I find many to be aphoristic boulders. However, let me quote the following, as it should be most emblematic of Chilon's personality.
Be more ready to visit friends in adversity than in prosperity. Prefer a loss to a dishonest gain, the one brings gain at the moment, the other for all time. Do not laugh at another's misfortune. When strong, be merciful, if you would have the respect, not the fear, of your neighbors.
He is the same man that, according to Thucydides, warned about the island of Cythera's proximity to Sparta and the Peloponnesus. Diogenes has him as exclaiming,
Would it had never been placed there, or else had been sunk in the depths of the sea.
This is the island that if Xerxes had invaded, as he was counseled by some exile, the Greeks might very well have lost the war against the barbarians. Likewise, it is the island from which the Athenians, under the likes of Demosthenes, Cleon, and Nicias, caused so much trouble to the Spartans. In the end, Chilon died in old age. The cause, excessive joy after his son won a boxing match. Apparently, an epitaph to him includes, or ends with, the line,
He died of joy. May such a death be mine.
Likewise, an inscription on a statue to him reads,
Here Chilon stands, of Sparta's warrior race. Who of the sages 7 holds the highest place?
Of course, the Spartans claimed their own was the best, lol. Before continuing with the other sages, let me quote a pair of aphorisms based on Chilon, the Spartan poet.
Intellect is best measured by how far it foretells the future, temperance by how well it reacts to the present, and character by how unaffected it is by the past.
The main effect of good education is the barring of self-deception.
Freedom is the most difficult to sustain because it is the most self-destructive.
Pittacus was a native of Mytilene. This is a city in the island of Lesbos. He and a group of brothers referenced as the Alcaeus overthrew a tyrant. Later on, he fought a duel, Iliad style, in a war against Athens. Obviously, he won his combat. The people of the city honored him so much that they elected him dictator for 10 years. He did so peacefully until he ceded his power. He was granted some land which he made sacred, public domain. He declined an offer of money made to him by Croesus, and obviously he came to be considered one of the 7 wise men. Diogenes references a female historian named Pamphila. I imagine her book no longer survives, as saying he pardoned the killer of one of his sons, as he said,
It is better to pardon now than to repent later.
Apparently, a certain Heraclitus tells the story differently. He tells it regarding the murder of one of the Alcaeus, the band that deposed the tyrant. In this case, Pittacus says,
Mercy is better than vengeance.
One of the more remarkable laws of this man was making the punishment for crimes committed while intoxicated twice as heavy as otherwise. The reasoning was that this would aid in discouraging abusive drinking. It is funny as presently most nations, if not all, take the opposite position. It is a matter of debate. Surely one could argue that if a drug is to be legal, then illegalities committed under the influence of that drug should be more severely punished. Call it a compromise. Pittacus is referenced in Plato's Protagoras. Many of his famous phrases are quoted. I will attempt sculpting some of them. Pittacus also wrote a poem of about 600 lines and a prose work titled On Laws. The latter was meant to be used and learned by the citizens of Mytilene. He lived past the age of 70, but before ending the account, Diogenes goes over an advice Pittacus once gave a young man. To make a long story short, the advice is not to marry a woman that believes herself to be of superior status. It turns out that Pittacus had done this and, to a certain extent, always suffered for it. Lastly, the historian quotes a letter the wise man wrote to Croesus. The king had asked him to visit. It seems that Croesus wanted to know all the wise men. Pittacus accepts the invitation but refuses any material gift or donations. Bias and Cleobulus remain, but for now consider these aphorisms based on Pittacus.
Avoiding mockery only needs secrecy and concealment.
While prudence is commendable foresight, courage is admirable reaction.
Bias was born in a city called Priene. Apparently, he earned the highest renown as many considered him the highest of the 7 sages. I say apparently as why it is not altogether clear by Diogenes' account. In fact, the historian himself is not clear about certain things. Bias might have either been wealthy or merely a laborer of a wealthy household. Either way, it is told that he rescued, I guess as they were lost or abandoned, a pair of girls and raised them as his own daughters. Eventually, he might have found their father and returned them. Be it as it might have been, it was these girls, once grown, that first announced him as a wise man. They did so before the city's assembly, and thus it was him, legend says, that first received the famed tripod. The one that the oracle had instructed should be granted to the wisest person. Bias is also famous for tricking a foreign tyrant who was besieging the city into giving up the siege and agreeing to an armistice. He did so by fattening a pair of mules, although the besieged city was lacking food, and covering a large pile of dirt and mud with a thin layer of corn. These things made it appear to the enemy that the city was faring far better than it really was. Thus, the foreign tyrant agreed to peace terms. Yet, Bias' single greatest talent was his ability to speak, his oratory. Famously, he died in court after given a plea in defense of someone. After the jury had voted and found the defendant innocent, he was found dead. He also wrote a now lost poem, and we are granted many of his sayings. Let me quote some.
The growth of strength in man is nature's work, but to set forth in speech the interests of one's country is the gift of soul and reason. He who could not bear misfortune was truly unfortunate. It is a disease of the soul to be enamored of things impossible of attainment. We ought not to dwell upon the woes of others.
I took pleasure in finding that he recommends, or praises, the ability to change or accept change. It should be noted that he was a religious person. Most curiously, it occurs that once a man asked him to define piety and he did not answer, he held his silence. When asked why he was silent, he said,
Because you are asking about what does not concern you.
Truly, it now seems to me clear that must have been Jesus Christ reasoning when he did not answer Pontius Pilate's question. Of course, it seems to me that reference to this wise man could aid in contextualizing that occurrence in the gospel. Let me quote some more.
He advised men to measure life as if they had both a short and a long time to live, to love their friends as if they would someday hate them, the majority of mankind being bad.
Then there are some sentences that I will save for aphorism sculpting, although it should be noted that my beloved prince of Ephesus, Heraclitus, the presocratic philosopher, held him at the highest of regards, LOL. There is one more sage on this video, but before that, perhaps you will like these aphorisms based on Bias' account.
Growing faith in an arrogant soul is like growing fruits in the desert. One does not receive water, the other does not admit ignorance.
Madness is speaking without thinking and expecting to appear sane.
The wise are the slowest to decide, but those who persist for the longest time.
According to legend, Cleobulus descended from Heracles. That he was not only most intelligent, but also equally beautiful and strong. Seemingly, his greatest fame resulted from a vast series of riddles and songs. Diogenes says that these are some 3,000 lines in all. Also, he apparently knew King Midas, as some say that the inscription on this king's tomb was written by the wise man. The historian might not have known the songs and riddles himself. He merely references a single one. He credits Pamphila, the previously mentioned female historian, for preserving it. It speaks.
One sire there is, he has 12 sons, and each of these has twice 30 daughters different in feature. Some of the daughters are white, the others again are black, they are immortal, and yet they all die. And the answer is, the year.
Truly, what a tragedy that they be lost. Noteworthy, Cleobulus supported the education of women. The historian quotes many of his counsels.
When anyone leaves his house, let him first inquire what he means to do, and on his return let him ask himself what he has effected. When men are being bantered, do not laugh at their expense, or you will incur their hatred.
Diogenes also quotes a letter he wrote to Solon recommending him to come visit him at Lindos, which apparently was already a democracy. Curious. Although this video ends here, remember that Diogenes Laertius outlines many more sages, as well as most Western philosophers of antiquity. Don't miss it. Now consider an aphorism based on Cleobulus' account.
Every morning, ask yourself which are your intentions, and every night, ask yourself which were your accomplishments.